Good afternoon from Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Ben Bohall with the Nebraska Forest Service, and this is Through the Thicket. We're live here every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time to talk trees and plants. And, well, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave your comments or questions below in the chat box, or you can send an email to us even at trees@unl.edu. And we'll do our best to talk about your question on the next episode, or even this one if we catch it in time. We're here with Graham Herbst and Chrissy Land. They're our community foresters for Eastern and Western Nebraska, respectively. How's it going, guys?
Good night, Ben. Thanks.
Yeah, it's beautiful weather around here.
It is. It's been great weather all week. So I guess for today we have several topics. It's going to be kind of a nice, all-encompassing episode. Is that right?
Yeah, Ben. So every year, of course, we partner with the Arbor Day Foundation for the Tree City USA program, where communities can demonstrate the importance that they put on the trees in their community, and then they get recognized in various ways. And so that's a collaborative project along with state agencies. In light of COVID-19, of course, most of those boxes were mailed to everybody, but I did take a handful of them to distribute around the metro area here in Omaha. And while I was doing that, just took some photos of landscape issues and things that I saw in the area, and wanted to share those. There's a couple that aren't from my travels recently, but kind of interesting. So I thought, Chrissy, we'd start off talking a little bit about construction protection for trees. This is on University of Nebraska Omaha campus. As you know, universities are constantly building and remodeling and changing. And so these landscapes are always in fluctuation, and sometimes that can be a problem for big trees. What do you see here?
Compaction.
Right.
Compaction. I also, okay, so that was a negative comment, but a positive comment, I do see some fencing to try and protect, really identify an in and out route of to and from to localize the traffic. I mean, that's a good thing. That's definitely a practice that we want to promote, is if you have any construction going on, you kind of want to minimize that traffic and, you know, put it into one space. So that's a good thing that they've done here.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to know if there were other alternative routes to this site that were not near such big, beautiful trees that are well established and absolutely have, you know, important routes going through there. I mean, the downside of it is, you know, this construction can relatively happen fast, and I say fast as in it can happen in a year.
Right.
Fast. But then you end up with trees that don't respond to the damage that's done. What is that saying that you always remind me of? About when trees die?
Oh yeah, they don't die when they're killed.
Yeah, they don't die when they're killed, right? And so it's, you know, this is like that toddler standing there kicking you in the shin over and over again. Here's one of those kicks, and every single time somebody drives through there, it's a kick to the shin, and you end up bruising material and you damage it. But then the tree doesn't die at that time. It could take 5 years for the effects to that root system to actually start showing up in the canopy of the tree, which is what we typically look at for a health radar. Like, is the canopy the right color? Is it the right density? You know, is it, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But like those underlying wounds that happen, we don't see until probably multiple years later.
And you can't see it very well off to the right-hand side, but there is sort of a really low amphitheater off to the side, off to the right side of this path.
Okay.
So this picture does really demonstrate how construction protection for trees is really about compromise in a lot of ways. We're not going to be able to save every tree. And sometimes paths need to go where there are trees already, and there's not much that can be done about it. We can't have all this traffic on the footpath for the students of the school, and we can't go to the right either where there's a big steep hill and some concrete benches and all that. So, you know, construction protection isn't about being Captain Save a Tree for every single tree that's on the property, right? We have to give and take a little bit, but usually as tree people, we're giving a lot more than we're getting in terms of that protection we expect to see. So just you know, you can see that amphitheater off to the right a little better in this photo. You can see this linden that's been struggling a little bit in the past. You know, typically we'd like to see either particle board laid down to distribute the weight of this equipment,
Right.
or a real thick pile of mulch chips to drive on if it's only going to be a couple passes in and out. But this seems like constant, you know, there's cars parking up there. Parking is always an issue on university campuses. So these construction workers probably like being able to bring their truck all the way up to the job site and that sort of thing. So while we would like to see fences 30 foot out from all the trees, it's not always possible to do that sort of thing. And I just thought it was an interesting topic to just explore real generally. I will give a bit of praise to University of Nebraska at Omaha. Their program to manage trees resulted in one branch from the derecho being broken from the windstorm that we just had. They could have had way more damage campus-wide if they weren't actively managing those trees and pruning them and looking for, you know, potential risk. And so kudos to them for getting through that windstorm relatively unscathed.
Yeah.
Anything else on construction?
I love that you bring up the conversation of compromise, because yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is you have to be able to evaluate and think about, you know, what are our limitations, both good and bad, and where can we try and aim for somewhere in the middle where compromise is okay.
Right. And like I said, most often it's the landscape managers having to do the compromising because the budget has been whittled down to very little by the time you get to the outdoor stuff.
Right.
So, you know, that's, you know, just sort of par for the course, I guess. But Chrissy and I, we do what we can to promote these sort of practices where it's feasible to do it.
Yeah.
Next one, this is at the I-80 exit at 370, which doesn't matter that much. What are we looking at here, Chrissy?
It looks like a very great, I would like to say this nicely. There's some good layering here. We have a different combination of shrubs. I like to see that there's groupings, you know, and I like to see that we don't have like individual trees out in the middle of a lawn. And, you know, we're creating a green element probably at a really big intersection, and I'm sure that they've got some visual things that they got to take care of. But, you know, you have the different relationships. I see some grasses, the shrubs, the small shrubs, the big shrubs, and then larger trees. But it seems like the one in the middle is maybe not the happiest in this location. And so it you know, to some extent, there's been a good effort to group things and keep them out of the irrigated lawn and put them with other things that have more similar needs. Trees, like you know, we talk about companion planting.
Right.
And, but maybe it's just, I would bet that from the road construction many years ago, that the soil here is not native and is very foreign.
Right.
And it probably has a very unique soil chemistry and soil profile.
Right.
And maybe doesn't have the needed, it might be missing some of the needed things that trees, for them to grow happily. And so maybe that's why the one in the middle is not doing so well. I mean, the one on the right looks like maybe it's some kind of an oak.
Yeah, look, there's a little dieback on it. Yeah, the birch tree in the middle really is what caught my eye. All your comments about the landscape are totally right on. And what I wanted to point out is, you know, this is not some new yellow-leafed cultivar of birch. This is just a tree really struggling to even survive in this landscape. And to make that case, I did pull a picture of birch in its native context, what it's adapted to grow in, right? This is not a tree to be planted as an individual in a big, sunny, open spot with a bunch of turf grass around it.
Right.
The adage that I've heard and continue to use is birch is a tree that wants sun on its shoulders and shade on its feet, right? It's adapted to grow in a colony, in a dense planting with lots of other birch trees around it. And this could have been a great opportunity to recreate something like that in a big, expansive space like we have. Instead, we're planting a single birch tree that's just really struggling in this sort of landscape where, like Chrissy mentioned, we have poor soils that are probably really compacted with little to no organic matter in them. The soil dries out really quickly, being so open with lots of turf grass like this, and the tree's just struggling.
Right.
Now, you could call this iron chlorosis if you want to, because it looks like that from here. If we looked closer at the leaves, we probably wouldn't see green leaf veins with yellow tissue in between, telling us that it's not a nutrient deficiency that's going on here. The tree is just really struggling to get what it needs to thrive in this sort of setting. So it's always good to think about the context that a particular tree comes from, learn a little bit about it. Even just a Google search for what's it look like where we find it in nature can tell us a little something about how we could be successful with it. And if they'd have come through with a couple dozen of these in small bare root size, we could have had a really nice planting of birch in a place like this, and they'd probably be doing at least a little bit better that way.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I love your point about think about the natural context.
Yeah.
Of where the tree comes from. We talk about spruce all the time. Spruce wants to be, north side of a mountain with its feet covered in snow all winter.
Mm-hmm.
Getting winter moisture. And we have spruce that do great in our irrigated lawns, but as soon as those systems get blown out, and then we have a really low moisture winter, and we don't get any additional moisture, you basically bottle fed it all summer long, and then for 5 months throughout the winter, it's not getting anything except for what Mother Nature provides. And then we end up with, stress and things follow stress. And so, but yeah, it's definitely right tree, right place. Let's think about the native context of the tree, and does it fit the area that we want to put it in?
Yeah. For spruce, it gets even worse back east here, Chrissy, because now we've dropped hundreds more feet in elevation. We've got more humidity. Warmer nighttime temperatures. Those summer nighttime temps that stay in the 80s really stress out those spruce trees, with the transpiration that they're not able to do effectively. Last week when we were talking pruning, I made the same point about linden and how it's another one of those trees. It's a forest species. It's adapted to grow close together to others, and it just gets this really awful structure sometimes when we plant it individually all by itself.
Right.
So what we're looking at here is some ash trees. They're on Ash Street in Ashland.
Oh, how fabulous.
So I got a triple whammy there. We can talk a little bit about what's going on with these trees, but that alone, it was just kind of fun to share, seeing ash trees in Ashland on Ash Street. So there we have it.
That's cool.
In the case of the individual tree on the right in the last slide, we did have some sidewalk repair.
Yeah.
Any comments on that and implications that has?
Yeah, if we look at the trunk of this tree, which is kind of in the shadows, but we can see some extra foliage coming off of it. And oh, look at those holes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and we talked about stress, and stress is followed by more stressors. That's followed by stressors. It's like your immune system. When you're not feeling well, or you're not sleeping well, and you're not taking care of your health, like you're more likely to have something attack your immune system and not be able to bounce back from it as well. And so, we think of trees the same way. Like in this case, it's an unseen damage to the root system.
Yeah.
But we have this nice, beautiful sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that someone at some point blamed the tree for lifting that sidewalk and for the reason to replace it, maybe, or maybe it was just old.
Right.
But we talked about last week how trees are such opportunistic organisms. And so, there's probably some sort of seepage of, whether it was oxygen or water in the cracks of the concrete as it started to degrade. the roots started to take advantage of that resource, and as the relationship keeps, and then it gets out of balance. And so, but I'm sure probably happened was somebody said, well, we'll just get rid of those roots. And I came in, took up the sidewalk, cut the roots off, laid down, I'm sure they compacted it, and then laid down some more concrete. And so again, now you have a tree that's been greatly stressed by losing, probably maybe some major feeder roots, some major anchor roots.
Mm-hmm.
And now that tree is feeling under the weather. And so that stress or that low immune system now invites invasive or the next problem, which is typically, an insect or disease or something. And it looks to be here that at the size of those holes that maybe those are our native ash borer.
Yep.
It's taking advantage of a weakened tree.
Yep.
So
yeah,
we can tell the stress from the tree because of all the suckers coming up from the bottom of it. Like it's kind of a mayday sign.
Yeah, when I'm in Ashland on Ash Street looking at ash trees, I'm going to look for EAB, right? And as you mentioned, these holes look too large to be EAB. When we see the canopy in a second, we don't see a canopy that's indicative of EAB infestation. You're not going to see whole EAB exit holes on the trunk like this unless the top is really far gone.
Right.
But yeah, you're exactly right. The stress is what leads to the borers. If you have a tree with borer damage and you're doing nothing but put an insecticide in the tree, then you're not really addressing the stress that brought those insects in the first place. In the forest, wood-boring insects are the cleanup crew, right? They can literally smell stress in trees and are attracted to those trees that are already compromised. So we need to take those cues when we're seeing a problem like this in our trees and we say, oh, well, we need to kill those bugs. Yeah, sure, we need to kill the bugs that are killing your tree, but that's not the underlying cause. You're still just chasing symptoms at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So there was some
it's like taking cough syrup. It's like taking cough syrup for a cough. To spray a tree for insects. It's
or a fever reducer, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like your body gets a fever in order to fight problems, and so if you reduce that fever, sometimes you're not doing yourself any favors.
Right.
Yeah. So there's some of that dieback that we'll see in association with the stress and the borer damage, coming along behind that initial stress factor.
Right.
And,
again, the cue here is what I saw just from the photo is not only the borer size, the hole size, as far as is it EAB or is it our native ash borer that we're already working with, have been for years and years, is the height, like you said, on the trunk. Is, you're seeing this at eye level or below eye level, and they're about 1/4 of an inch, it's not likely going to be emerald ash borer. With an ash borer, but again, like you said, it's the underlying problem that invited them in, not necessarily,
Right. Yep. Very good.
Unfortunately, I don't think there's much that can be done for that tree.
Yeah, knowing this
Love
stuff
it.
is much better as a preventative measure than after the fact. Lots of times there's not much to be done afterwards.
Right.
So this is redbud actually in my dad's backyard. I stopped and had lunch with him outside to catch up for a little bit, and I remembered that he had these volunteer redbuds that he sort of twisted around each other, kind of braided them together. You can see in the picture on the left.
Okay.
And so when I was sitting there eating, I noticed that there was sort of like the canopy wasn't very uniform. There was a difference to the leaves that we'll look at. So the trunk that is twisted around and sort of constricting itself had leaves that were lighter, kind of lime green. You can also see they're kind of puckered and curled a little bit. And then the new growth that's coming off that's not restricted like that is a darker green color and just has a better appearance.
Right.
And so it was just kind of a fun lesson on how, yes, a tree can persist if you twist two of them around each other and allow them to grow that way. But it's not ideal, and the tree is having some difficulty with moving moisture and nutrients through that wood that's twisted around like that.
Yeah, it's one thing if it's, you know, a surgical graft union and
Hmm.
not just a smashing of tissue together kind of thing,
Yeah.
which I find really interesting. Because if you were getting a skin graft, like you wouldn't want them to just like put the new skin on top of your skin. Like they have to create the wound to put the new skin there so that way it fuses.
Right.
It has to be like a wound on both ends for it to fuse together properly. And in trees, you know, that's very specific. But
Yeah.
if you just put, it's kind of like included bark, you know,
Hmm.
point, or even a stem girdling root. Like
Right.
a tissue that is just being sandwiched together.
Hmm.
And you know the result is not ideal for the long-term health of the tree.
Right. And that was my thought. I liken this to sort of like a low level stem girdling root where it's not wrapping all the way around the trunk, and at one point it's circling it over and over and creating that constriction, you know, in different areas
Right.
around the trunk. And you can see that the tree obviously wants to not grow that way because of the profusion of other sprouts coming
Right.
off the trunk that have a pretty substantial size to them. The tree's going, we can do much better, you know, growing branches
Right.
that are going to have, you know, less of that constriction or none at all.
Yeah, and you think about some of our species that are like that, you know, aspen, like our colonizing species that are like naturally and I also think of things like some of our shrubs and stuff like, you know, American plum or even like a rose or something. Like when it starts noticing that a section of the, you know, single plant, which one single plant could be many sprouts off of the same root system kind of thing. But once it starts realizing that like one part of it is dying or not effectively providing for the plant, like it'll start throwing sprouts to try and compensate for that. And so that's sort of how we end up with like our colonizing plants like aspens. Like most of the time, you know, they sucker like crazy and everybody's just really upset about it because they just want this nice single stem tree. When in nature, you know, one trunk on the root system may only live on average, you know, maybe let's just say like 20 years or something. But then the way it continues to live on for, you know, 100 years is that same root system will throw up another shoot, grow another trunk, feed the root system, and it's sort of kind of like our strawberry plants. Instead of going over the top of the soil, you know, they're going under the soil and throwing up more growth to be able to bring those nutrients back in to sustain life over a long period of time. And so it's not just one stem or one tree. The whole thing is one tree because it's off the same root system.
And Chrissy and Graham, I want to interject here really quick because we have a question and it's about this photo. So Jerome is asking, could the cupping be from herbicide damage in this photo?
No, typically if it was herbicide damage, we'd see a uniform pattern to that damage.
Right.
You know, herbicide damage does often cup upwards, like we see in this photo. But you know, I blame myself for not taking photos that were more clear. But it's very direct correlation between one branch having this foliage and another branch not having that distinct look to it. But herbicide damage is definitely where my mind goes first when I see pictures like this. So Jerome's right on with at least considering that. Yeah, that's a great observation as well. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting, you know, and this is very similar to the pruning concepts I talked about last week. If we prune a branch, that's going to stimulate energy towards the laterals that are behind it. And while there hasn't been any pruning happening in this case, as Chrissy mentioned, the tree is still aware of the conflict and lower efficiency going on in the main trunk of the tree that's initiating it to have new vigorous growth off of that to accommodate its energy needs. So it's not pruning, but it's still showing that physiological response that pruning will cause as well.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Great herbicide observation as well as a possibility. Finally, just a quick species profile. This is also in my dad's backyard. A related tree to the redbud, this is Katsura tree, Circetaphylum. It has the same sort of heart-shaped leaves that you see out of redbud. In the photo, you can also see sort of the pinkish color to the petiole, which is the little stalk that the leaf is attached by. A lot of ornamental characteristics in the spring with this tree because the new foliage emerges that same sort of pink color and then blushes back to green, sort of like chokecherry will do with the purple varieties of chokecherry that are sold in the nursery trade. My colleague Bob Hendrickson claims that this tree can smell like cotton candy in the fall. I haven't noticed that before, but you know, I don't question Bob's intuition or observations on those kind of things. I have yet to smell anything, you know, distinct from this tree in the fall when it's starting to turn color. But just a really nice, smaller ornamental tree, maybe about 20 to 30 foot is what we'd expect out of it. It's listed as zone 4. I've never really seen it in central or western Nebraska much. Maybe something we can, you know, throw in the landscape here and there and see how it does out there, Chrissy. But otherwise,
I was gonna say, yeah. Tell me more about what this tree wants. Does it want to be in a protected area on the east side of the house in an irrigated lawn situation? Is it, you know, something like that, you know, maybe you could push it, you know, how far? I don't know about all the way to the panhandle, but
right.
You said it was zone 5?
And I've seen some sources listed as zone 4.
Okay. So it would be kind of a marginal.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely pushing it to its limits.
It might be something we get a lot of winter kill on, dieback
right.
every year. It may look kind of ratty and not be real desirable, but we don't know yet. In this case, it is a native of Japan, so I can't speak really strongly to the context that it has there. But in this case, we have a west-facing backyard, unirrigated turf, and it needed a plant that sort of framed the window that you see there up to the house behind it in an attractive way. So the tree's kind of centered on that window to be a focal point as you look through the window into the backyard.
Tell me, does it have any other additional benefits as far as like attracting pollinators or attracting certain bird species? Is there any sort of wildlife benefit from this tree?
I don't have a lot of other folklore around it. Since it's not a North American native, I don't have any good information about relationships. That's one of the downsides that people that are really big on natives will point out is that trees that aren't native to this continent, they don't have these established relationships already with insects, which doesn't mean that they won't happen, just that there aren't millennia of time for those relationships to be solidified and made really strong. So it doesn't have very conspicuous flowers from an ornamental standpoint. It does want to be sort of like multi-stemmed, but it can be pruned into a small tree if you want, and does not have any strong suckering habits that I've observed in it yet.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So definitely for back east, and then experimentally further west, tuck one in somewhere, maybe in a protected, on the south side of your windbreak, somewhere where you have a nice little microclimate that would be conducive to a tree that's not super duper hardy for Nebraska, all of Nebraska at least.
Yeah, cool.
So there's my species profile for the week, and a handful of random landscape observations I saw over recently to share with you guys. So thanks for weighing in on that, Chrissy. It's always good getting your thoughts on those as well.
Yeah,
I'll put our email addresses back up.
Yeah, and if you guys ever have any questions, you're more than welcome to throw them into the chat on our live feed. You can also throw them in the chat after we are not live anymore. And of course, just send us questions. If you have any topic requests you would really like to hear more on, send them to trees@unl.edu. You can reach out to Graham or I, whether it doesn't matter. If you're east, you can talk to either of us. We don't divide, but we do conquer together. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. Ben, do you have anything to add for us today?
I do. I have a question on Facebook actually from Mike.
Cool.
He's wanting to plant a bur oak. He wants to know what would make good companion plants for it.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah, Mike.
We don't have that information, unfortunately.
Mike, I think, is down by Beatrice. If it's the Mike that's a good fan of our show already that I know. And yeah, I would say any kind of shrub that's going to occupy that space that you would normally mulch under the tree. Mike is big into growing food, so you could give some thought to wild plum. You could give some thought to serviceberry, currant.
Buffalo currant.
Yeah, buffalo currant.
Fort Collins has one, Gwen's buffalo currant, and it is my favorite. I have put it into a number of landscapes, and it's the currants themselves are very sweet. You don't get like the tart with them. I'm gonna sales pitch that one all.
Yeah.
Also go and check out, if you're into growing food, not only shrubs, but also looking at the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum and looking at possibly a bloom box. If you say you have a 10 by 10 area, you can go to NSA's website, and you can just even go to Google and type in bloom box NSA, and it should bring it up for you. And what it is you fill out a profile, and Sarah kind of figures out from your profile what would best suit your area, and you can do a combination of pollinator plants and fruit crop shrubs that you could think of. But I definitely agree with the American plum.
Yeah, it's kind of a bigger one. So you want American plum to have the space to get 8-10 foot both directions. You can prune it pretty hard if you need to, but if you're not ready to do that work every year, give it the space it needs to reach that big mature size that it's going to.
Right.
I know my plums are getting close to being ready in my backyard, and trying to decide what I'm going to do with those next.
I'm kind of a sucker for go big or go home. And so, we talk about layering, the bed big, don't put it in a 6-foot ring. I mean, if you have the space that allows, put your bur oak in a big space with a lot of companion plants and pack them in there. So that way, my theory of plant management is that the more plants there are, the less weeds there are, because there's no room for the weeds to grow. And so, of course, in the first couple of years during establishment, you'll have a lot of that. But if you can layer the landscape and have things like your perennials and your shrubs, your perennials and grasses, and then your shrubs, and then your trees, then you have a really great root system intertwining with all of them. They're all going to be similar needs adapted to our conditions in Nebraska, and have a different need than turf grass if it is going to be near or around any turf grass.
Right. Some of your self-seeding annuals can be really handy here as well, because you're going to have a sunnier environment under that tree early, and then as your bur oak gets larger, that's going to get shadier. And so self-seeding annuals can sort of fill that space early, and then recede as the shade gets denser, and you can backfill with perennials that tolerate that shade better later on.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. For the kind of anticipate for the first 10 years of the companion plants are going to be primarily sunny, and then you're going to slowly transition to more shade tolerant plants over time. And so just kind of keep that in mind, that as the tree canopy gets bigger, the more shade you get, the more transition of the companion plants will happen, and things will naturally go on their own. I mean, if they stay and kind of keep going, then let them be. So
think about like your black-eyed Susans, your coneflowers, things that they drop seed and they proliferate that way. They seem perennial, even if sometimes they're just annuals that are seeding themselves reliably. And don't be afraid to plant things with different light needs, because that helps you learn how the light situation is changing over time. You start to see this plant decline and this one do better. You learn more that way than just planting a single species of something and then having problems at some point.
Definitely. Cool.
All right, one last question for you both before we wrap things up. This one from Tara. are you all seeing a good crop of bur oak acorns this year?
I just visited the swamp white oak that's really important to me, and it did look like it was going to have a pretty good acorn year. Oaks have the term for this is mass, which just refers to the quantity of nuts that are produced in one year versus another. It's a strategy that oaks use to make sure that the squirrels don't, and turkeys and deer don't get every single acorn. If they gave off a lot of acorns every year, then the animals would stay. So instead they have years that are lean, where they don't put a lot of energy into that. And then there's not a lot of pressure and the animals disperse. And then next year they can produce more and hope that at least a couple of them turn into new trees. What have you been seeing out west, Chrissy?
You know, I have to be honest, I haven't specifically looked at them. I know that earlier this spring, we definitely had, I felt like a more noticeable crop of seedlings coming from previous year's oaks. And so, you know, pull in the weeds and it's like, oh, there's an oak, oh, there's an oak kind of thing. But I haven't paid attention to the trees this year quite yet, specifically looking at what their production of acorns are this year. So I'm definitely going to have to go look at that.
Yeah, and they may be just starting to form out west for you guys, being a little bit behind in the growing season.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question though. That's something we can certainly weigh back in on next week.
All right. Well, we will look forward to it. Thank you, everyone who left a question for us. And again, if you think of any questions when you're watching this later, you can either leave those in the comment box below, or you can email us at trees@unl.edu. Graham and Chrissy, I will see you both next week. I hope you guys have a good weekend.
May the forest be
Thanks,
with
Ben.
you.
All right. Bye, everyone.